a bird and trout knife. We're going to be doing it with more of the simpler tools to show that you don't need a bunch of expensive equipment to get started. And we'll just get going. The first step is we're going to oversize our bits oversize our pinholes just past 1/8, just to make sure that there's plenty of clearance. Next we're going to chamfer the sides and help the glue fill in those holes a little bit better. When you're first setting up these 1x30s, you want to make sure everything's square. Little metal platen's kind of flimsy, so just get a square and true it up. Make sure to tighten it down. Good belt will save you a lot of heartache. I'm going to start off with the 36 grit belt. We're going to mark our center line. This is 1/8 inch stock, so you can use an 1/8 inch bit. I have a jig here that I use that's set to an 1/8 inch. So we're going to start at a steep angle to get the center line established. These 1x30s heat up kind of quickly, so just make sure you have water nearby so you can keep your metal cool. On this, we're kind of showing you an example. You can see different light reflection areas, and that's just a different angle of sanding. It's kind of showing that it wasn't keeping it flat the entire way across, like on this side. You can see right there's a little bit of a indentation. You can see it from the light. And we're going to be doing this with the hand torches. Just make sure it's the yellow gas, otherwise it won't get hot enough. This can take a minute. If you had 2, that would be better, or a little kiln with refractory bricks or something. Then we'll be quenching this in just used motor oil, but you can use canola oil for the 1095, which is what the steel is. Obviously check it with a file, make sure it skates. We're going to be using a toaster oven to do the tempering cycles, 2-hour cycles at 400 degrees. You can get these anywhere. They're great for the beginners. Okay, so we've done the 2-hour tempering cycles. You hear it, skates a file really nice. And we're gonna go back to the 60 grit. I'm gonna take this edge, the cutting edge, down thinner. That's our next step. Now, since it's been tempered and heat treated, you want to make sure that you're watching the temperature of the steel. Make sure to constantly dunk it. Don't want to ruin the temper. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's 60 grit marks right here. The rest of it's to the 120. So that's what we're working on, is just getting those 60 grit marks out. We're going to be using the slack part of the belt to round off the spine, make it a little bit more comfortable. Do this with the 120 grit. Now we'll just start hand sanding. So we've got the 120 grind lines going this way. Now we're going to hit it with 220 going this way. You want to make sure you alternate your sanding marks so you know what you're doing, get a good finish. I use leather on top of an aluminum bar to get up next to the plunge lines. And then I just switch back to just a normal flat bar for the rest of it. I use the leather to give it a kind of a soft backing to do the spine. So with this knife, we'll be doing it with this blue and white resin, and then white G10 for the pins. You can get one set of scales out of one block. And so what you'll do is that you'll trace it this way, and then flip it and trace it that way. And then that'll leave you with two pieces like that. And I did it with the blue on the inside, and that way your knife will sit perfectly inside there. So we oversized the tang holes a little bit, but with this, we're going to be using an 1/8 inch drill bit, since that's what the pin sizes are. Give it a nice snug fit. You can kind of see here it jiggles a little bit, just to let you know that it's undersized from the tang. Then here we're just lining up all the pieces and using it as a guide so they're straight through all the way. It'll make assembly easier. Now we're marking off the top part of the handle. You need to do this step before you glue it on. You won't be able to get to it. Once it's glued on, if you don't have the sanding disc on your little 1x30, you can use a hacksaw or a bandsaw. Take care of that. And since this table rotates down, we're going to be taking it down all the way down to a 45 and then beveling the edges. Make sure to wear protective gear on this part. So now that we've got it beveled equally on each side, thanks to the little plate that moves, we want to hand sand these to get them to a nice, at least 400 grit. With this resin stuff, the shinier, the higher the grit you can go, the shinier you can get it, which is always nice, makes it look pretty. You can get this at any gun store. We'll be coating it, and then we'll be tumbling it with rocks, kind of the same way we did it with the first month, but we'll just be doing it with gun bluing. You can kind of see how quickly that works. The more you put on, the darker it'll be. And then once you get the color finish you want, then we can tumble it in some rocks. We'll be using a 2-part epoxy. It's equal parts, 1-to-1 ratio. This is available on the WaterJet website. So we'll be using this one to glue up. And the only other thing I did was I leaned out the inside so the glue would have some place to kind of solidify into. And I just used a chamfer bit on my drill. So again, just equal parts. Not that much is needed. And with oversizing the tang holes, it makes the assembly pretty quick. So this is something I learned kind of the hard way. I like to have mine pointed downwards. One time I had it flat and the glue ran all along the length of the blade. That was a lot of work to pick up and clean up. And after this, you just want to make sure that the plunge lines for the scales and the metal meat are cleaned and wiped off. There's no serious excess. Should be good until it dries. Okay, it's glued overnight. We're going to sand down the pins, and then we'll do the outsides of the handles, and then we'll get it finished. So we did the pins first, just to make sure it could sit flat on this little table. And then we'll do the spine. And then work on the inside. This resin stuff turns into a real nice powder. It gets everywhere, so just make sure to wear the proper safety protection, respirators and glasses. We got the majority of the handle shaped. We're gonna go back over it with a 400 grit belt to clean up the spine so we can get rid of the deep marks. And then we'll go on to hand sanding, and then we'll re-blue the spine when we're done. We're using a quarter grit progression of 220, 320, 400, and then 800, and then a wet 1000. The nice thing about the G10 pins is that you don't have to worry about them doming like you do with metal pins. So you can use your hand, your thumb. You don't have to use a flat bar or file or anything. Here we're just using the wet sandpaper to finish, get a nice finish. Okay, the handle's done, up to 1,000 grit. Before we re-blue the spine on the tang, we're going to sharpen it. So put back on the 120 grit and we turn this sideways so you can kind of see it better as you're holding the correct angle. We're going to be doing it on the slack part of the belt. We'll be doing this until you can see the burr develop on each side, and then we'll strop it. Well, boiled in seed's not necessary. It was just to kind of help give it a shine. The resin, if you can keep polishing it more and more and more, and it will just hold its own. Just removing the burr on a power strop. You can use any piece of leather for this.